and thank you everyone for tuning in today. It's a real honor to be part of the World Hope Forum. And for some of you that may not know, Field+Supply is a modern makers craft fair that we started upstate about 7 years ago. And so I wanted to just start off with a video that will show you about the fair itself and give you a really, I think, a good sense of what it's all about. So let me just set this up really quickly, if you don't mind. And I'm just going to start with a video. So I'll start with a little bit about my background and how we ended up even getting to create Field+Supply. But I'm from a little town in Arkansas called Russellville. And this is actually an image of the lake that's just down the street from where I grew up. And, really my first exposure to design was with craft fairs. We didn't have a lot of, obviously cultural institutions or museums in my area. And so that was really my first exposure. And I've always just had a real passion for craftsmanship. My father also as a hobby, did woodworking in the evenings, and I would go up to his shed now and then and watch him make things, and was just always fascinated with how you could, create something out of just wood and tools, and it was really mesmerizing. So I ended up going to, we didn't have great guidance counselors in my high school, I have to be honest. And, they just didn't talk about very many opportunities other than going to college and majoring in either business or elementary ed, which was the options that they talked about. And I just knew that I ended up majoring in business and economics, but I always knew that there was something else out there that appealed to me related to design. And so I ended up moving to New York and going back to school to study interior design. And just wanted to show you a few of my design projects. I've always tried to incorporate pieces that are handcrafted into my work. This is an apartment in the West Village, and the table in the foreground is by George Nakashima, who I just think is, at the top of elevated craftsmanship. The two lights, Zimmerman, and this bench is by Max Lamb. I just always feel like when you can bring in these pieces into a space, it just automatically sort of interjects some soul. Because when you think about the passion and the skill and the time that it took to to make these pieces, there's a soulfulness that comes with them. And so I always like to try to incorporate that into my work. This is a house that I've worked on with architects Ike Clayderman Barkley in Princeton, New Jersey. Again, a large number of handcrafted pieces here. And I think one of the things that I realized was, you know, a lot of times people associate crafts with things that are maybe homespun or a little old fashioned. And I could recognize the beauty with so many things that are being crafted now, and it being really elevated and sophisticated. This is an apartment in downtown Manhattan, and these are a number of craftspeople that I've worked with. This table is by Jake Shemansky. This leather poof is by Moses Nadell. This blanket was from a friend of mine who knits. And I just love being able to incorporate these things into my interiors. Again, these are some handcrafted items from some people I've worked with over the years. This chair is beautiful by Michael Robbins. I designed this coffee table with a maker in Kingston, New York. We worked together. I love mixing these things with vintage pieces as well. And this is a townhouse that I did in the West Village. Again, a number of handcrafted pieces with makers that I've worked with over the years. And again, this Nakashima lamp I love. This is a chair from the 60s by Max Gottschalk, and beautiful work, all done by hand. And so I knew that in, you know, over the years working with a lot of these different makers, I would discover people at different spots, whether it was a fair, whether it was at a showroom. And I just started to think about, you know, it would be great if there was a way to kind of showcase a lot of these people in one location, as opposed to having to just kind of discover them in different spots. And so I bought a house upstate, again, probably 9 years ago. And I was passing this barn that was being renovated in a big field, and it was so beautiful. And one day the person that was doing the renovations was outside, and I talked to him and said, you know, what are you doing with this barn? And he said, I have no idea. I just took on this project as sort of a passion project. And so I sort of started thinking about, again, this idea of bringing people together, the different makers, and, you know, trying to create a modern version of the arts and crafts fairs that I grew up going to. And to me, it was really about not just bringing the people together, but really creating a cool experience. So having, you know, fire pits there, music, food. And this is in a town called High Falls, which is a very, very small town. And we sort of took this over in one weekend, over Columbus Day weekend. I love the idea of the fall being when we would have it that time of year, because of the leaves changing and the crispness in the air. And when I was growing up, that's when a lot of the craft fairs were in the fall. And so we didn't know what to expect that first year. We planned this in like probably 2-3 months. And we happened to get a mention in the New York Times that we were doing it. And so in a very, you know, we, I think, had probably 2,000 people show up, and maybe 24 vendors. And, you know, I sort of worked myself silly trying to get it ready. And when it was done and people responded to it, I thought, well, that's good news and bad news. I mean, I'm happy people responded, but I thought that it was just going to be a one and done type situation. But I knew that we needed to do it again. And so we had it there a second year, but we quickly outgrew that and ended up then moving it to a hotel in a town just up the road in Stone Ridge. And this was at the Hasbrook House. And again, we were able to expand because the vendors started to want to participate more. People were coming from all over the state to attend. And so we were very excited that it was growing. But after the third year, we knew we needed to find another location. And so we were fortunate to be connected with the Hutton Brickyards in Kingston, New York. And this is an incredible location that's a former brick factory that's been brought back by a developer. And obviously, you know, there was plenty of room to expand at this location. It's right on the Hudson River, beautiful spot. And two things that had always kept me up at night when we would have the event were parking and weather. There was never enough parking, and weather was always, you know, unpredictable. And this was a situation where I knew we would be covered physically, and also there was plenty of parking. And so this is just showing you how it's kind of grown over the years. And I think that it started to also expand from not just, you know, furniture and accessories, but we really wanted to create a lifestyle fair. So we introduced, you know, fashion designers that were doing things in a low number of quantities. We ramped up the food. We wanted to have like a local farm there selling produce. Again, you can see it's right on the river, and just the history of the river and thinking about everything that had gone up and down that river and even developing the city. I love that history. The space just had a really great energy. We were able to expand the music and build a stage. And it was important to me to really engage all the senses. I just wanted this to be an experience, and not just so that people would be excited about the crafts themselves, but also the community. And, you know, even though some of it was more elevated craft, it was important to me that it never felt exclusive. And we wanted anyone that wanted to come to be able to come. And while they might not be able to afford a dining table in one booth, they could certainly, you know, take away a local honey from another vendor. And it just was an event that people would come and spend hours at, and sometimes come back 2 or 3 times over the weekend. The vendors started to get really creative with their booths. This is a maker, a company called Sawkill, based out of Rhinebeck. And I just liked how inventive people started to get almost like competitive with one another to see who could create the best booth. These are just some images of the makers at the fair. I wanted there to be people there actually doing the work, just because I think it's so fascinating when people can start to see who it is that's creating these things and how it's made. Here are just some images of some of the vendors. The woman on the right does beautiful dog and pet accessories, and occasionally she'll bring her pet rescue goats to the event and march them around the grounds, which is a lot of fun. We started getting some really great press, and again, just more and more interest from vendors and from people who wanted to attend from across the country. We eventually ended up bringing in another fair in the spring called the Spring MRKT. And before the pandemic, we had I think close to 15,000 people between those two events, which was very exciting. Then I was approached by a gentleman that runs the New York Design Center in Manhattan about trying to bring this into a showroom space at his building. And initially I just had no interest at all, because I just thought, you know, I still have my interior design business. This Field+Supply is kind of a beast. And I just didn't even know the first thing about running a showroom. But he kept offering me incentives to where it would have been silly not to have at least tried this. And I also knew that it would be another great platform for a lot of these makers. I wanted to really focus more just on the furniture and lighting and accessories for this particular space. And so we opened it, and I didn't want to give the same name as Field+Supply. And so in thinking about a name, we actually just call it simply Fair, which I love the simplicity of. And this was the first showroom. And again, it's a mix of local makers, and then we started to slowly introduce some Danish manufacturers. This is a Hans Wegner ox chair. And I just, again, wanted to show how what a lot of people were doing now work so well with some of the iconic designers from the past, and show how those things can be mixed in together. These are some rugs that we have in the showroom by a company called Merida. A lot of these are made outside of Boston, really beautifully handmade. Again, just a mix of makers and different products. Really, I think a great assortment of elevated craftsmanship. This is one of our makers, Michael Robbins, does absolutely beautiful work in Germantown. And I think his work is so timeless. This is a chair by Fignule, who we also represent. And this chair, believe it or not, was designed in the 40s and all done by hand, beautifully, beautifully executed. But again, I wanted to bring these two groups together and show that, they really can be, work well together in the right context. These are a few other of our makers and their pieces. The console on the left is by an incredible artist named Christopher Kurtz. The console in the middle is by a company called Fern. The table on the right is also by Jake Shemesky. I think what was, we really wanted to do was not just highlight these makers, but also help them get into the trade and the market and be recognized as, high-end pieces that designers and architects would want to work with. And so, we also help them with their margins and figuring out what is the right price that we think is appropriate for the industry. And I know that with a lot of these artisans, that's their strength is in their creativity. And sometimes, they need to lean on us a bit as far as the business or the numbers, and also just helping them market themselves. This is a company called DBO Home that does a beautiful ceramics. And this is one of my favorite companies we work with called Overgarden Diamond. They're a little shop outside of Copenhagen. And believe it or not, this entire bench is made by hand. All of those metal pieces are welded together. It's not machine made. All of the leather is hand stitched. They do absolutely incredible work. And I think that one of the things that we also recognize is how important storytelling is and the narrative behind a lot of these makers. And that's one of the things that we've really tried to promote over the years is each of their stories. Because to me, there's a lot of value in knowing about the maker, the process, the fact that, some of the wood tables come from slabs that are 100 years old, that the bench that I just showed you and it's made in a small factory right outside of Copenhagen, and how that's all hand welded. It just adds value to the work, and also hopefully people will understand and appreciate that passion and skill that comes with each piece. And like I said earlier, that level of soul that it brings to a space. The pandemic hit and a lot of things changed. And I think it was even more important to keep that messaging out there and keep each of their stories out there. And so we quickly came up with a concept called a maker moment, where we would send out questions to each of our makers and have them fill that out. And we started a slideshow on Instagram that would, show their work, and also show the questions and tell them a little bit about where they came from, what the process is. The questions range from, your favorite music, where you're from, what room you're sitting in, what are you looking out the window. It just varies. Each person could kind of answer the questions, which questions they wanted to answer. Here's just a a sample from Studio DB Home. And, you know, they are based out of Connecticut. She does a lot of the pottery. He makes a lot of the furniture. I love this console on the right with these copper handmade staples that they, you know, use to really celebrate the natural material and the cracks in the wood or the knots. I love all the handwork with these things. And again, this just kind of puts a name to the face with these artists and what their passion is about. And so then we realized we were not going to be able to have the actual event this year. And so we had already been thinking about how we could bring an e-commerce component to Field & Supply. And so we really put that on the fast track and put this together in a record time as far as I'm concerned. I mean, it was just a matter of months. But we wanted to make sure that people had access to these goods, that the artisans could still have a platform to sell the goods. And I'm going to show you another slideshow that this was, we decided to do our first virtual market to actually, you know, also launch the e-commerce platform. This was in July. And this was just a video that we did on the homepage to kind of introduce people to the site. And I think it's just going to be easier for me to play this for you now.
My name is Brad Ford, founder of Field & Supply, and I'm excited to welcome you to our first virtual market and our new e-commerce platform. I started the fair almost 6 years ago to highlight elevated craftsmanship and the incredibly talented group of artisans, most of whom have dedicated their lives to making beautiful design. Considering recent events, we felt like this was the perfect time for people to experience Field & Supply in the comfort of their own homes, while also supporting a lot of our favorite makers. Everything feels better with a soundtrack, and we've curated a number of playlists for you to shop to over the next few days. Also on the homepage, you'll find an interactive map of Hutton Brickyards, where we typically host our event, so you can wander around from booth to booth and hopefully discover something new or an unexpected find you have to have. You may also want to check out our food and beverage section to see some delicious recipes from a few of our favorite food vendors, chefs, and their new cookbooks. You'll also see a schedule below for our F&S Live series. This includes live, interactive, virtual events that will be broadcast throughout the weekend. We've also set it up so you can chat with many of the artisans via instant video chat or by sending them a message on their profile page. Lastly, we're proud to be supporting the organization Crafting the Future, a collective of artists concerned with the lack of racial and ethnic diversity in the fields of craft, art, and design. You can learn more about it below, and we encourage you to make a donation to help support this important cause. We hope our virtual market will bring a little bit of Field & Supply into your home, and that our new e-commerce platform will become a valuable resource for design inspiration and shopping throughout the year. I appreciate you supporting this talented group of makers and hope you'll enjoy some great shopping.
So we were very excited to be able to launch that. But I think one of our biggest concerns was how we can bring that same experience that you get at a live event to the platform.
My name is
to the website. And so in addition to, you know, really trying to have beautiful collateral and photography, we wanted to have live videos where people could actually, you know, host an event or a demonstration. Let me show you, this is one of the potters that did an F&S Live. What's great about this is then we also are creating content on the website, trying to make it a much richer experience. We also have, because food is such a component of the physical event, we wanted to try to bring some element of food to the website. So we have recipes from some of the vendors that are there, some chefs that are friends of Field & Supply. These would all have links to cookbooks. But just, again, to create a richer experience, we curate playlists so people can shop while they're on the site. This is a lot of fun. I'm super passionate about music, so this is fun to create. We also have field guides so that people, when we do go back to actually hosting live events, there's a resource for where people can stay, where they can eat, other cool things to do in the area. This is something we hope to expand into other markets. I think doing all of this has been a big learning curve. But I think one of the advantages to now having this e-commerce platform is that we actually have analytics that we can then, know what's working, what's not working. We can give some of this information to the makers so that they know, what's a good seller, what prices are, selling, what's the best price it's selling. And so that's very cool. The other thing that we've done just to try to keep the conversation going throughout the year instead of just 2 events is host micro events. So we hosted a chair exhibition called Sitting Still a couple of years ago, where we just focused on a number of different chairs because I love chairs. I love how each one is like a little piece of art. We've hosted pop-up Field and Supplies. This was at Rejuvenation in the city. We're actually hosting one with ABC Carpet and Home starting in February that will run for a few months. We're super excited about that. But overall, I think what we're trying to do is just really, celebrate and be a cheerleader for craftsmanship. And I think it's important to educate people on the value of craftsmanship. Sometimes it can be a little bit more expensive, but when you think about the time and energy and the skill and the passion that goes into these things, you really start to understand why it is priced that way. And that, hopefully these are things that, unlike some of the big box store and the furniture that you get there, these things will be passed on from generation to generation and be future heirlooms, which obviously is great from a sustainability standpoint. And that's it. This is another interior I had done where we used a lot of local craft. And this is one of my favorite quotes because I just think, what you put out there is basically what you get back. And so again, Lee and Barbara, I appreciate you letting me be a part of this and letting me talk about something I'm super passionate about. And hopefully stay tuned for new events that will be coming. But I'm hoping that we will be back to a real physical event next fall. So thank you again, everybody.
Thank you. And I look forward to coming to the physical event physically.
Thank you.